we wouldn't be here today without a tremendous amount of research. And by research, both, looking at studies, information out there on the market, but also talking to some wonderful clients and also other potential customers and just general industry partners.
Mm-hmm.
So before I delve into that, can you tell me a little bit about research itself and how you've been involved in research in the past? And are you any good at it?
I don't know about any good, but I think learning. I think research for me, I started getting more heavily involved with it in university and learning a little bit more about what formally research means in an academic context. But I was always a little bit, I was trying to distance myself from this notion of how formal research can be. To me, research is just an extension of this innate curiosity that I have for this pen is really light and yet it falls. But then you look at an airplane up in the air and it's it's way heavier than my pen, but it's up in the air, right? How? And having that curiosity and asking those questions and going about finding answers for them, right? Whether when I was a kid, just asking my dad these really random questions during our road trips, where is this coming from? But then subsequently, working in more of an academic context throughout university, it feels like the end goal is still the same, right? You're curious about a topic and you're just trying to ask yourself questions that you don't know. And ideally, the community academically as a whole doesn't have answers for, right? And it's your approach to say, hey, this is kind of what I came up with. Thoughts, right? Ideas. And so, having done a little bit of that over the years, I think it was interesting. But I think my experience in academia was disappointing in some ways because it felt to me as though people's goal is more to impress those who will review their work. There's a definite element of perfectionism and imposter syndrome that I felt working in an academic setting for a while. But so trying to distance myself from that and trying to say, what do I really care about? And what's a really perhaps neat, but maybe less, flashy way that people have gone about exploring this problem space? What's something new that I could contribute, as a student? And maybe I don't have the baggage of, decades, an AI engineer with decades of experience around, modeling and predicting, forecasting. But, I can kind of think in different ways. What's something that makes sense to my brain coming at this from a fresh perspective? So that was a little bit of my experience in academic research and some of my frustrations with it. And much to my surprise, there's a ton of research that happens in the more corporate or business or commercial world. But it's much more grounded in the sense that it's much less about me trying to impress you as my boss or my supervisor with the output of my research, being, producing an incredibly well-written report that is 600 pages long and as detailed as you could possibly ever hope for. That's not really the goal, right? The goal in business is ultimately very simple. Can we make money from this, right? Can we survive as a company because of this? And I feel like that element really grounds the research, perhaps more so than I felt working in an academic context. So here, our research is really, the questions that I'm asking is, what's a problem that's big enough for you that you'd be willing to pay for me to solve it, right? And hopefully it's a problem big enough that, you would pay for me to figure out how to solve it in the process. And so those are some of the difference that I see. I think that research in the business world is much more grounded and pragmatic in the sense that you're looking for a straightforward answer to, here's my offer, will you accept it or not, right? Whereas in an academic context, I felt it was a little bit more nuanced and perhaps political in some ways. And so, also methodologies, all of that completely different. This is very much talking to people, trying to figure out this type of information with much less rigor, academically speaking, than those other research projects. And yet the results and the focus of research in a business world feel to me much more grounded and factual than those applied in academia. So that was always an interesting, almost paradox to notice.
Cool, appreciate it. So what kind of research have we done at VivaCitadel so far?
Yeah, good question. I think we probably look at research fairly broadly. But some of the examples, I think initially we did take a look at several market reports. At the time, we were looking at public key infrastructure, or PKI, and trying to identify, for digital certificates and certificate authorities, what does the market for that look like? So relying a lot on data that was already collected by other organizations and their own reports from their own experts. We did a little bit of that, but there's a limited amount of value to be had, right? Because you can't sell to a report. Ultimately, you have to sell to a person who has real problems and real budgets and real constraints. So I think we placed a significant emphasis in terms of talking to customers, right? Our existing customers, people that those customers might know, just people who were willing to take a seat and have a chat with us about what we were trying to do. And I do think we got it wrong for a while there in terms of maybe trying to steer the conversation in the direction that would get me that approval that, as a former researcher, I so desperately crave. And then over time, learning how to navigate this process a little bit better and more productively to try and actually get to the answers that I do need to tell my team whether to go forward with path A or path B, right? And so, I think it's been a lot of that, talking to customers, trying to validate what we have and trying to do so in an effective manner, right? Trying to sift through the lies and the fluff and the compliments and all that and trying to get to the meat of it. A little bit of kind of data analysis in terms of what's already available, but I feel like over time, as we launch our MVP and as we continue to hopefully onboard more and more users, we might shift more towards this quantitative side, or at least start to explore it a little bit more once we have a product in place, which we can collect metrics about and we can investigate sort of macro and micro tendencies. But I'd say so far, for the most part, definitely been very reliant on customer conversations and hopefully navigating them as productively as we can.
Any shout outs along the way to clients, partners, anybody else that you think would be just worth a note?
First of all, everybody who's ever sat in a call with us, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's just super helpful. And if it wasn't for these people having the goodwill in their hearts to sit with us and have a conversation where it's super exploratory, there's no structure necessarily to it, we wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't have identified this promising direction for us to build out an MVP based on. And then secondly, research doesn't pay the bills necessarily. Sometimes you might be able to get an assessment where you're learning and doing some research, and that's of value to another organization, but we're a commercial corporation, right? And so research is costly, and we spent a significant amount of time doing it, and that wouldn't be possible were it not for government funding, right? Things like NRC IRAP, which we've been fortunate to work with over the last 2 years, who have helped us fund our research and expending resources in this kind of uncertain direction, right? Being able to take that leap of faith, were it not for organizations like that, I don't think we would have been able to manage it. And I think we would be much more torn on a day-to-day basis between doing work that drives revenue now to keep the lights on, to keep the bills paid, and then doing work that is exploratory and risky, but also ultimately has this higher payoff of being more scalable and more impactful solution in the long term.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, shout out.
Pivotal moments along the way, like where have been those times where we've gone either, oh crap, we're going in the wrong direction, or oh, hold on, there could be something good here, and how has that shaped VivaCitadel?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have an easier time in hindsight finding those moments, because in the moment it doesn't really feel like anything. It just feels like every other day where there's a ton of uncertainty and you're just trying to do the most you can. But it's almost like over time that kind of averages out into, oh yes, we were going down this direction and then we were going down that direction. So I think initially when we were still working with public key infrastructure or PKI and exploring that path, one of the more pivotal moments was when we decided that that's just not worthwhile pursuing as a product development direction in terms of the state of the market today and what impact can a startup have in that space. And I think making that decision gave us the leeway that we needed to start being a bit more creative about how we were approaching this whole thing. It's not like, hey, we've got this product and we're already selling it to a client, and so let's just do more of the same thing. And instead looking at, okay, doing more of the same thing is costly and pretty hard. How could we flip this on its head in some way, right? I feel like that was really interesting. So then we started going down the smart cities path, and that was super interesting. I would say, I would echo what you said before. A huge pivotal moment was that demo that we did in front of several munis. And it was really interesting, even at a personal level, because I was shattered for a couple weeks because of it. We were so certain that we were going down this direction, and that was it. And then we get there to the demo, basically showcasing our like life's work in front of these people, and they're just sitting there with the blankest stare. And personally, that's really hard to take, especially when, like me, you're maybe a bit of a perfectionist and you have all these ideas about how you'd like people to perceive you. And yeah, that was another hugely pivotal moment, because looking at that and staring it straight in the eyes and going, yeah, we were wrong, you know, like it was super important for us to go through that experience, not only to find out a direction that is more aligned with where problems lie today, but also from a personal experience level of like growing some thick skin around this and being like, yeah, like let's do more of this, right? Like I want to stare these things straight in the eye and go, yeah, this is all I got, guys. Tell me the truth, you know? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that was pretty pivotal as well. And I think more recently, maybe not related to research, but just in terms of the engineering team and how we've been working together, I've been super happy to see it. But I think recently it feels to me, maybe this has been in place for a while and I'm just now noticing it, but it feels to me like we've all clicked of, guys, this is our shared goal as a team. This is a huge mountain for us to climb within the next like month and a half. How are we going to do that? And instead of us all piling up and saying, okay, this is a problem, this thing that we're doing is wrong, this is not the right approach for us to take, there's no way this is going to be possible. It's like, whew, okay, clearly no short of challenges, right? Like there's a million different things trying to kill us here, but how can we work together to get something meaningful out there so that we can answer the most important and pressing questions that we have? And I think seeing the team kind of shape shift into this very collaborative and super in tune machine that's dealing with a ton of uncertainty on a day-to-day and is doing it graciously, at least from my perspective looking in. It's probably a go ask the team. Yeah, that's been really cool to see, and I do feel like that's another pivotal aspect to what we're doing. So
yeah, awesome, appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know whether you remember, but I fondly remember May 2022 when you and I sat on a call with IRAP and our ITA, and I had no idea that at that very moment we were going to be pitching like what we're going to restart researching. And the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the call was basically our now current ITA, who's awesome, basically saying, we don't fund startups.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't fund consultancy companies. You're not developing something that's aligned to what we think would be good. And if you do get money from us, it's going to be no more than, say, $50,000. Mm-hmm. That was the opening arguments from that call. And I think we then spent the next 45 minutes trying to convince them that, hold on, yes, you're right, but here's the upside of what we're trying to do here and where we're going. And ultimately we were successful at that, and that's taken us down the path. And it's just been an awesome path, but yeah, still a long way to go. So I guess my last question on this is, are we going to pivot again?
Yeah, probably.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a work in progress, right? I think that if we had looked at VivaCity from the start as we are going down this path, we were going to build this product, we would have probably failed already, right? And learned a ton from the experience and all that, but we're still kicking. And I think that is in large part due to us just being super customer focused, in the sense that for anything that we do, there has to be a customer willing to pay for something along the lines of what we're trying to build, right? Maybe it starts with an assessment and it helps us research while we're making some revenue and we're funding the team to do some more technical research or whatever that might be. But I think being very thinking about the opportunities that emerge based on the skills that we have and the tools that we have at our disposal, rather than trying to force a vision into the market in some way. I see that as a huge asset to what we've done so far, and probably one of the reasons we're still alive and we're sitting here and having this conversation as a company. And I can see that happening again in the future, right? I think that we're getting close to a very exciting time where there's a ton of challenges in terms of getting our MVP ready and launched. But then once that's ready and launched, as I said before, that's going to be horrible for a number of reasons that we're only going to find out after we launch. And then we're going to go and get to fix all those reasons, right? Or learn new things and take different approach to things that we've already done and all that stuff. So I have no doubt that the direction that we're going down will likely change over the next several months. And I think it'll start changing a bit more rapidly once we get this MVP launched and we start getting some more, I don't want to say real time, but like some close to real time, near real time feedback from people that are using it and telling us the many ways in which we got it wrong. And if we do that for long enough, we'll hopefully be really good.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Here's to hoping.
Sounds good.